All right. So today on Hustle Northwest, we have Ryan Bogus. He is a doctor of physical therapy, athletic trainer, and owner of Headquarters Physical Therapy. You might know it on the handle as HQPT. Ryan's background is primarily in sports orthopedics and high performance physical therapy. In the athletic training realm, he worked with Oregon State football and baseball, as well as San Francisco Giants. Following physical therapy school at George Fox University, Ryan started Headquarters Physical Therapy in 2018. And since that time, Headquarters PT has grown into 4 clinics in Beaverton, Milwaukee, Tualatin, and now Bend. Ryan continues to work with patients across the spectrum of athletic experience and injuries. He works with NFL players such as Stephon Gilmore, Cooper Kupp, Brandon Cooks, and was featured in Sports Illustrated as part of Coop's Super Bowl MVP season. He lives in Canby with his wife Brittany and 3 children. So do we cover it? That's quite a resume there.
Yeah.
I think that's about it.
I mean,
Wow.
we're done.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
That was
a good
this was
episode.
great.
Yeah,
Thanks,
quickest
guys.
episode ever. But yeah, so you gotta be proud of that.
Yeah, it's funny. It was, still every day is a lot of work and it's a lot, but it's fun.
Yeah.
That's the cool part is I wake up every day and I'm like excited to go, and yeah, it's good.
So you study for this in college specifically.
Mhm.
So what was the driving force behind it? Did you really enjoy working with the athletes, or how did you get into that?
My mom. So I was a high school athlete. I played baseball and basketball, and I loved sports growing up. But I've been this height since I was in like 7th grade, and was like tall at the beginning, and then kind of got like
Then everybody
athletically-
else started
Yeah.
going.
like everybody kind of caught up to me right now. I was like, okay, maybe I'm not, going to be a professional basketball
Yeah,
player or a professional baseball
Not everybody
player.
could be that.
And
right?
my mom is great. She was like, Ryan, you're not going to be a professional athlete, so
You're like, "Mom."
let's figure something
No,
else
moms
out
are-
for you.
Moms are supposed to you're the best player in the world.
Yeah, that was my
You're gonna
dad.
be
that was my dad. My mom was very realistic, and thank goodness for that. But she was an athletic trainer in college,
Oh.
and just right after college when she had me, she was at Arizona State and Oregon State working football, which I think there's a case to be made that she might be the first, if not one of the first, female athletic trainers ever in Division
Really?
I college
That's
football.
amazing.
Yeah, that's cool.
So it's kind of a cool
Shout
little
out to mom there.
shout out to mom. She's
Yeah.
amazing. And so she was like, hey, you love sports, you love science. Let's see about, if you want to do athletic training and maybe physical therapy. So I started shadowing PTs in high school, and my first day at Oregon State, just like walked into the Gill Coliseum athletic training room, which is very much off limits and something that I probably shouldn't have done. They were like, oh, you're not supposed to be here, but let's take you over to the actual, sports medicine building.
Oh,
And
okay.
so, yeah, I kind of like got into it at Oregon State. My mom was the driving factor there.
Interesting.
Mhm.
So the sports medicine side is interest you as far as like you obviously love sports, right?
Mhm.
What's your favorite sport?
Baseball.
Baseball.
Baseball is my favorite
A
sport.
lot
I'm-
of shoulder injuries in baseball.
Yeah, it's funny. I do most of my work in football and, track and field and running as a PT, but come from a baseball family. I told you my son's name is Nolan. His
Yeah.
middle name
Like
is
Nolan
Ryan.
Ryan.
Like
Yep.
Nolan
Okay,
Ryan.
I got it.
Middle name is
I used to
Ryan.
collect those cards as a kid.
My youngest son is named Logan after Logan Gilbert, who's a pitcher for the Mariners right now.
Okay.
So
Wow.
yeah, we're a big baseball family, and we watch every pitch of Oregon State baseball.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So as far as like physical therapy, someone who doesn't come from any of that background, you go to a physical therapist when you need to. It seems like.
It's usually like a back. Or a
Yeah,
knee or
in the
something
working
like-
field, it's like I threw my back out opening the
slept
fridge
wrong.
or something, and
Yeah.
so now I got to go and do physical therapy. But for on the sports side of things, it's a lot more proactive with that. There's a lot more the athletes want to go to physical therapy because they need to either prevent a future injury or they need to recover so they're not out of the sport.
Yeah.
So I think tell me if I'm wrong, but bringing someone back from like that injury is probably the most fulfilling part of it.
It's huge. Yeah. You take ACL rehab, for example, which is something we do a lot of. ACL tears are common amongst athletes, and, it's a like 9 to 12 month process, and you get to know these athletes really well, and you see the ups and downs, and it's this really fun natural progression where you see progress like weekly. We're getting stronger. We're becoming more fit and more ready for this return to high performance. And then, it feels like obviously the athlete's going through it every day. So, it's like the days are long, but the weeks and months are
Sure.
short type thing. And you get to the point where you're like, wow, this is pretty cool. The human body is very adaptable.
Yeah.
Like we've made these changes over time, which is so fun.
Yeah. It's interesting with especially with you going through like a high school, they're probably a lot more rubber band like and they can recover a lot quicker. But as their skill increases, they go into college, they're more prone to injuries. And then if they make it into professional, they're at the top of their game, but they can lose it in an instant.
Yeah, that's a high stakes world, is the world of professional sports, which is a big part of my job. And I think the goal is to always just put people in the best position possible you talked about injury. You brought up the term injury prevention, which is like not even a term that I use in my vocabulary. It's always risk reduction. We're always like injury risk reduction, which is nothing. I'm not like saying you said anything wrong.
It's like putting a seatbelt on. You might get an accident, but it's going to, prevent it from being super bad.
It's like likelihood ratios, right? So
Yeah.
you're like, hey, we're going to look at these key performance indicators, and which, might be different for each individual person that comes in. And we're going to correlate that with what we think is going to put you in the best position possible to perform really well and handle the stresses of what you're going to encounter, say, like in an NFL season, which, those are some really big, strong athletes and a lot of force and a lot of volume. Just the amount of like a training camp to a weekly practice schedule to getting ready to play on a Thursday, Sunday, or Monday. It's a lot.
So I'm guessing on the professional side, the technicality of physical therapy increases from high school to that level to where you're doing some new different techniques or how does that work out?
What's funny about that is there's kind of a branding maybe in the space that there's like train like the pros, like for a high schooler, for example. And what's interesting is the framework is really genuinely the same of like adaptation, right? This is what performance training, or you might think about like any sort of training that I do, is we're looking for a positive adaptation. And so, the framework that we approach that positive adaptation with is very similar across the spectrum, but the methods and the modes of training that we might use are a little bit different. But I would say, I don't know that it necessarily increases in complexity or like what you might think of as fanciness. Right. I also think, more novice, lower training age athletes, like a high schooler, and the same is probably true for, an NFL player, is basics, just the basics done really, really well, and break down the big rocks. And then, we might add in some smaller rocks, but I really want to make sure that sleep, nutrition, performance training, and movement, and these things are really well taken care of before we like throw it like NAD injections at you or, some like ancillary thing. I really want to make sure that these things are dialed in because those are going to move the needle the most. And there's nothing against NAD injections because those are awesome too. But the effect is significantly compounded if we're doing these, tier 1 things really well.
Okay.
Well, so our daughter, I was telling you when we were talking earlier that she went through sports physical therapy.
Mm-hmm.
It's like walking into that space is completely different than walking into like a traditional PT. And then when we were talking to the guy she was working with, he was saying actually athletes are some of his favorite people to work with. He's like, because they come, they show up, and they work so hard.
Yep.
And so he's like, it's just a different experience. He's like, we're here to serve everybody, but it's when you get that, especially high school athletes that are just like hungry to get back in the game. So
you can see it. It is very fun. And, every once in a while, a really special high school athlete comes along and you're like, wow, they've got it. You can kind of see
you're like, I'm part of their journey.
Well, and that's the fun part, right? But they've got that like drive inside them and that killer instinct. And, they're ready to work. Yeah. And you can spot that.
But you see everybody.
Oh yeah.
Across the board.
100%.
Okay.
I saw, one of my patients, a 72-year-old guy I saw yesterday, and tennis player all the way down to kids. And our staff has, a wide range of experience across the spectrum. So kids to older folks and post-operative and you name it.
Well, and it's interesting because I feel like there's a shift going from like, okay, let's just give you a prescription for something
Hmm.
to let's figure out what the core cause is. Let's
Hmm.
figure out, if things aren't in alignment, what's like, okay, you have back pain, but why do you have back pain?
Hmm.
Not just let's give you pain medicine sort of thing. So I think I actually think that's really huge instead of people just getting dependent on getting a band aid for it, figuring out what the core cause is.
Yeah, I think along those lines too, just even would say within maybe the last, I mean, it changes all the time. Our field is relatively young,
Hmm.
right? Physical therapy.
Mhm.
And initially, a lot was based on tradition and kind of the athletic training room, and put some ice on it, and
They didn't have it back in the 50s. You just rubbed some dirt on it.
yeah, you smelling salts,
Yeah.
crack it open. Okay, get back out there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like, oh, where am I?
yeah, yeah. That was my mom's
Leather
day.
helmets and yep.
That was my mom's day.
Yeah.
But no, it's changed a lot, and I think some of those things are, the pendulum swings, and it's great because there's constantly new research coming out. So one thing that's really important to me is I try, you give recommendations based on past experience and expertise, but you have to marry that up with what's happening in the current literature,
Mhm.
which means there's a lot of cognitive dissonance.
Mhm.
Something that I thought, and my practice has changed a lot in the last 5 years. Something that I thought was true, then this new conflicting evidence comes on, and then I have this like boxing match in my head, right?
Oh,
Of
yeah.
how do
You're
I
like, no, I've always
change?
done it this way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do I change? And that goes back to like a growth mindset, right? Which I think a newer generation of practitioners, PTs, MDs, etc.,
Mhm.
are I think more in that growth mindset where they're not this like hard and fast. This is how it's done, and this is my rule. It's like it's more. There's a lot of humility that you approach it with, being like, I call it, and not just me, some of my network of people, like the least wrong solution, right? Like this will
least wrong.
probably change in the future, but as far as what we know right now, this is
I like
probably
that
the
term.
least wrong
I like
solution.
that term. I'm going to start using
I'm gonna
that.
start using that with the kids.
Yeah,
Like,
it works. It works with the kids for sure.
So, give me an example of kind of what you're talking about.
So when I was coming out of school, a big, pendulum swing was identifying movement dysfunction. So we assumed that if someone was having pain, they had to be doing something wrong in the way that they were moving. So we would screen them and we'd look at their movement, and we'd kind of like put those movements up against standards, and we'd say, okay, well, you're in pain because you're moving wrong, right?
Hmm.
We're starting to understand more now that, human movement is extremely variable. This is also a very Western mindset, is, things have to look right when you're moving. And we can look at Olympic marathoners, for example, and see, 50 different gait patterns that are vastly different across the top 50. You know what I mean? And no one way is, cookie cutter perfectly right.
Yeah.
And so we've kind of shifted more from a, dysfunction mindset where it's like, oh, don't do this, don't do that, stay away from this, to more of a movement optimism mindset, which probably involves dosage more than it does fixing people's movement. Now, don't get me wrong. We're looking at squats and we're looking at running technique and we're looking
Yeah.
at all these things. It just doesn't carry the weight that it used to. I'm probably more interested in, if you're a runner, for example, did you have a big spike in training, or did you have this dip where you were
Yeah.
sick for a couple weeks, and then, your last run before that was 10 miles, and then you jumped in at 12 miles and now your Achilles is hurting?
Yeah.
I'm looking probably at that, at the dosage of their training and the dosage of the stress that they're accepting,
Yeah.
rather, and I'm looking in the background at things that, we might be able to move a little better from an efficiency standpoint, but
Mhm.
not nitpicking people's individual joint segments, saying, okay, this needs to move a little different.
Yeah.
That's been a pretty big paradigm shift, to give you an example.
Okay. Yeah. So, like a lot of employers, especially if you work in a physical type environment, like a warehouse, like they have a class on like, here's proper lifting
Mhm.
techniques. And then if you hurt yourself, like, you probably didn't use a proper lifting technique. And it's like, maybe, maybe not. It could have been some other issue. I mean, everybody's different. It could have been something I did last night is compounding to what I'm doing now.
Could be bad sleep.
Yeah.
I mean, along those same lines, rounding your back was like a big no-no for a long time in our world. It's like, don't round your back. Now we actually train people to round their back.
No, actually.
Yeah, we'd always thought discs don't, the discs that are in between the segments of your spine, right? We always thought hey, if you injure one of those, you're just kind of screwed. They don't adapt. Now we understand that discs do heal and adapt, and actually appropriately dosed. Let me give that caveat, right? Appropriately dosed, exposure to loaded spinal flexion, you can build bigger, stronger, more robust discs. Crazy. Yeah. And so rather than just saying, hey, we're just going to avoid this movement altogether, it's like our spines were made to flex. We can flex and extend and do these things. So let's build what we'd call capacity through progressive overload, appropriately dosed to tolerate those positions. You brought up the workplace thing, which is interesting because we do a lot of workplace wellness at Headquarters PT, and we actually work with people in manufacturing. And so we do talk technique, absolutely, because from a performance standpoint, yes, there's a most efficient way in talking about physics and biomechanics and levers to lift, to move a mass, right?
Yeah.
But, we also talk a lot about movement variability, which has to do with not doing, mixing up repetitive movements, dosage, in terms of, how much too fast, like too much, too fast, too soon, and even just taking, breaks and recovery. And we talk a lot about sleep and nutrition and all those things, which play a big role. So, yeah, you kind of hit it on the head there.
So, and I noticed you have Beaverton, Milwaukee, Tualatin, Bend. Have you noticed, based on the area, you get an influx? Well, we have this business here, so we get an influx of these type of injuries at this location. Maybe Bend is like, oh, mountain biking downhill is a lot of the accidents are skiing, or that's a lot of the physical, like, that type of activities is the cause over in this area.
Mm-hmm. I think when you think of Bend, you think of people who are skiing and like hiking through the mountains, and which is very true. And then probably drinking good beer afterward.
I don't know how I fell
drinking
down
the
this
beer
mountain.
and then getting an accident.
That's true. But yeah, no, Jonah and Dylan over in Bend are amazing, and they see the same type of high school athletes and people that we see over here, but they also get a nice influx of those like more active outdoor population. Here, one of our PTs, Danny, is a former CrossFit champion, and now she's an ultra marathoner and runs 100K races and all this. So she gets a lot of people coming in from that kind of like outdoor trail community, and so we see a good mix there.
So I'm guessing with like automation coming in, where they're taking away some of the repetitive movements that would kind of grind at someone that was in maybe a station and some like work environment. So, since they're slowly taking that away, those injuries are less likely to happen. So are people just finding new ways to hurt themselves?
I would say, yeah. I mean, pain is interesting too, because you can have, you talk about paradigm shifts. We're learning a lot. We're in this golden era of pain science research, and starting to understand pain. And you can have pain without damage. You can have a pain experience without a physical insult injury to a tissue,
which is always hard when you go to the doctor, because the first thing, like, where does it hurt? And like, it hurts when I do that. And like, don't do that.
Or do you remember like the little like smiley face, like from 1 to 10, like where do you fall on this?
Yep.
And then you didn't want to seem like a big baby, so you'd be like, well, maybe a 3, and they're like, then why are you here?
You're like, it's a 5. It's just always a 5.
It's a 10 every time. It's a 10.
And they look at you. Okay, you want the prescription?
Prescription seeker. No, it's been really interesting to kind of, and once again, nothing is like the one answer, right? But it helps to build the framework that you approach someone with, where you start to understand like, hey, there doesn't have to be damage to be pain. A really good example of that is like, if you've ever known anybody that has had an amputation, and this idea of phantom limb pain. So you can see this in people that no longer have a lower arm, yet their wrist on their arm that's no longer there is killing them. Like they have arthritis type pain in a wrist that's no longer there.
That's wild.
Is it just because of the nerve above that is sending the signal, or is it the brain just thinking that there's something still there?
It's the brain. Yeah,
Wow.
the brain.
Seriously.
Yeah, we're starting to think of pain as more of an experience that's generated by the brain than a pain signal that gets sent up from tissues. Your brain is ultimately what makes the decision.
That just goes to how powerful your brains are too.
The brain
It's
is
kind of like the check
incredibly-
engine light that you kind of cover. in your car. That's
Yeah.
your brain. It's
But
like
we talk to our kids all the time too about how powerful your brain is, just your thought process. So it's like the stuff you put in it can really affect your entire life. So
Couldn't agree more.
yeah. So if you're putting negative stuff in, you're going to have negative experiences and that sort of stuff. So it's really wild to me how much it controls. But
Yeah.
I never thought of it as being like the reason for the pain.
Yeah,
So.
it's interesting, and it all plays together. But and I'll tell you, we're still learning a ton. I mean, you know how they talk about we know more about space than we do about our own oceans. You ever
Yeah.
heard that before? It's
yeah,
kind of like
it's wild.
we
to
know
think
less
that.
about pain than we do about the ocean.
Yeah.
Like it is a deep and wide area to cover, and it has a lot to do with past experiences, beliefs, expectations, what you've heard, just like you said, what you're putting in. Not to make anybody mad, but like one thing that drives me nuts is when somebody comes in, they're like, "Oh yeah, my provider told me I have the knees of an 80-year-old." You know what I mean?
They set the expectation.
And the expectations there,
And it's in their brain.
and now it's in their brain, right? So now they're a bad knee person, right? They're like, "Oh yeah, I got a bad knee," you know.
Yeah.
And we, being up to date on the literature, we know that you know there can be, if you look at, for example, am I going too deep on
No,
this?
this
No.
is amazing. We
Okay.
love this.
So you look at like disc issues in the low back, or just structural changes in the low back, right? The only people that were getting MRIs were the ones that were injured, right? So you would have back pain,
Mhm.
or you know, down the leg, sciatica,
Sciatica.
radiculopathy, that sort of thing. And you go in and you get an MRI, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, there's a disc bulge," right? So we got to do a discectomy or laminectomy or some sort of procedure. And those procedures weren't as effective as I thought they were going to be. And so some people who are way smarter than me said, well, let's look at what healthy, normal backs look like with an MRI machine. And they started doing what's called prevalence studies to just see what a, you know, quote unquote, normal back looks like, someone that's never had any pain or issues or anything like that. And they found disc bulges and disc degeneration and arthritis and all these sorts of things that are like pretty darn normal for people, you know. So once again, it's like that cognitive dissonance that kind of you got to deal with as a practitioner.
So talking about, you know, like the phantom pain and everything, what do you do from a physical therapy standpoint to somebody who they're feeling something that's not actually there?
Is it like a psychosomatic type thing?
You
or
could
is
you
it-
could put it in that into that bucket. And here's one thing: is I wouldn't say it's not actually there,
Okay.
because it's very
Sorry,
real.
I didn't mean
No,
to
no,
do
no,
that. Yeah,
that's okay.
yeah.
This is something that people will jump to, so they'll be like, "Oh, so you're saying it's all in my head?" No, because that's your lived experience,
Yeah.
right? So it's very real.
But it's not physically there. Like you can't see that your wrist is there hurting any
Yeah.
longer. Okay.
So my take on that is, when I look at somebody, and this is kind of a framework question, right? Is I'll look at somebody's movement potential. So
Mhm.
like when somebody walks in and they're like, "Hey, I want to do this thing, but I'm having pain." I'll say, "Okay, do you at baseline have the ability to even get into the positions that you would need to?" Like me doing it to them. Let's say it's raising their arm over there. Can I take your arm and move it over your head? And if they're like stuck here, then they've got a movement potential issue that it's not even fair of me to like, or fair of them to ask of themselves to do that, because
Yeah.
they can't, right? So then we would address that. The next piece of the puzzle, sometimes, you know, people would be able to do that, right? They'd be like, "I can't lift my arm up," and I can take their arm and like move them, and it's like, "Oh, it's all good there." Okay, so we might have a movement expression issue where it's like they have the potential to do it, but there's something that's stopping them from being able to do it on their own. And then thirdly, I would look at at their movement capacity. It's like, and capacity being the power to do X, you know, or X amount of Y. You know what I mean? And so from a capacity standpoint, I would be looking at their structure, right? Just like you said, it's something we can like see. Is it, you know, a
tangible.
strain, a tear or something, or, you know, and that's when you go into like differential diagnosis and critical thinking and kind of hash those things out. And maybe we're looking at an image or an MRI or something like that to kind of piece it all together. But I'm also looking at people's perceptual capacity, and the perceptual is like, what are they perceiving? What do they understand about their body. And
Does that go into like their pain threshold?
yeah, it absolutely can. And so the perceptual capacity, then you ask, what do you do when there's, let's say, no structural damage? Well, we would try and build perceptual capacity to tolerate if, there's no red flags and we feel good that this person can move into those positions. We would do what's called graded exposure.
What does that mean?
Which is exactly.
I'm like fascinated by this.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad I could be fascinating.
I'm like,
this
just stay here all day.
This is nerd stuff, right?
I love
This is
it.
good. But if you think about like very basically psychology, right?
Mhm.
So do you have any phobias?
I think everybody has
Yeah.
phobias. Yeah.
Spiders.
Spiders,
yeah.
snakes.
I hate snakes.
Yeah.
I'm a trail runner. I've had like really, really rough snake experiences. I did a lot of work in LA and like would always go out into like the Malibu Creek. And
Do they have rattlesnakes
yes,
out there?
oh my God.
Oh,
Yeah.
why would you do that?
I'm scarred. I know it was dumb.
I know.
But
Running in cowboy boots. Yeah.
so say snakes, right? We'll say
Yeah.
snakes. So if I go to like a psychologist or someone like that and say, hey, I want to get over my fear of snakes. By the way, the fear of snakes here where we live is like pretty irrational because chances are I am never going to like have any harm done to me
by a
by
gardener
a snake.
snake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to go in and they're like, okay, so what's the worst thing that they could possibly do first day? Throw an 18-foot
I was just gonna
python
say,
at me,
yeah.
right? And like,
Yeah.
here's a snake, you're going to be okay. You know what I mean?
Oh,
That's an overdose
Yeah.
of that stressful
Okay.
stimulus, right? But if on the first day they like show me a picture of a snake and I'm like, oh, that's kind of gross, but like I can look at it.
Yeah.
And then you move on to like a little rubber snake that looks realistic and like do a little touch and then look at a snake in a terrarium. But you're building these
I'm
experiences.
hating this exposure.
Yeah.
By the way, like I'm thinking about it in my head. Like I gotta go.
I totally get that. You're building, you're doing uncomfortable things
Okay.
that don't actually have a threat of harm. And you're having a positive experience with it. So it's like nothing bad happened,
Okay.
right? Like I did this thing and nothing bad happened. I did this next thing, nothing bad happened. And so then you talked about pain threshold. We might do something really similar where say somebody can't squat standing up. So I might move them onto their hands and knees and just have them rock back and forth, which is a squat. It's just not standing up against gravity.
Sure.
And it might be like a 2 out of 10 sensitivity or pain when standing is a 7. You know what I mean? So we're like, okay, look, we're squatting here. We're not doing a standing squat, but we're squatting
Yeah.
and a 2 out of 10 sensitivity, and we're okay. And that decreases over time, right? So actually, I feel pretty darn good here. And then we might squat to a bench, which isn't full range of motion. And then we might, eventually work our way up to like holding a weight and squatting all the while. It's a potentially stressful, sensitive position, but you're just building into that.
Okay.
So this is so your brain, like you were talking about, like an amputee feels the pain. There's no pain. There's no pain because there's nothing there, but your brain is telling the body there's something wrong here.
Yeah.
So what is the body's response to what the brain is saying? There's something wrong here. Is it trying to release something to control the issue, like cortisol spikes and stuff like that? And
Look at you talking about cortisol.
Look at this.
that's
spikes.
my
I
one
know.
word for the today. I can't spell it,
Mitochondria,
but
the powerhouse of the cell.
yeah, but is it like the brain's response, and what you're trying to do is train your brain to like gradually build that back to where it's kind of calming the brain down, like, okay, we're going to do little bits to get it back to where it's now the brain's check engine light is off.
Yeah, the response is appropriate for the stimulus.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to get to, right? It's kind of like, if you're another analogy for this, which is not a perfect analogy, but it's decent, is like if you are at home and you have an alarm system. Do you guys have a dog or anything?
Oh yeah. Got a couple.
What's your dog's name?
Remy and Ranger.
Remy and Ranger. Okay. So
Little yappers.
you're in bed at night and like 3 a.m. the alarm system goes off and you like run downstairs, baseball bat, like, all right, I got to defend the house, right?
Yeah.
And it's just Remy and Ranger had like set off your motion detector. So your response is out of proportion
Yeah.
with the
What actually
actual
happened.
threat, right? And you can kind of get to the point, if you take that analogy a step further, where alarm goes off at 3 a.m., you run downstairs, baseball bat, ready to rock and roll, and you're like, what's here? There's nothing here. And it could be a fly going through the room because, you know, that alarm system is so
Yeah.
sensitive to anything that is perceiving things that are not actually threatening to be a threat, but your response is the same, right?
Until your wife's nudging you, like, go check on it. Like, no,
No,
I know
it's
what
a
this is
fly
going to be
again.
again.
It's-
Yeah. Windows are breaking and you're like, I don't even care anymore. Yeah. Yeah.
So you're training your brain to like, maybe the response shouldn't be like full scale 911. It should be, so you're,
Somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And pain is good, right? If your hand is on a hot surface, your brain needs to generate that experience to tell you to move it.
oh yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's not that pain is bad. You just want the response to be proportionate to the stimulus.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So tell us about,
We
like,
didn't know we were going to do pain science today,
I
did we?
didn't.
That's, I mean, it's all part of physical therapy.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that's why I think a lot of people avoid physical therapy because they're like, "Ah, this is really going to hurt for a while. I was supposed to go, I broke my finger a while
Okay.
ago and I was trying to catch a football and it broke off a chunk. So I had to go get a pin put in. And so I was supposed to do like physical therapy. I was like, I don't want to do this. I went to like one
Mhm.
and I was supposed to like sit there like kneading like the little
Stress ball.
stress ball,
Stress
that type of
ball,
thing. I
yeah.
was like, ah. So I should have gone to it because I would have had full range of motion out of my finger. Now I don't.
Yeah, that's a tough
So,
one. Fingers are tough. The OTs are really good with fingers too. The occupational therapists, they do like hand specialties and stuff. But yeah, fingers are tough.
Yeah. So it's the pain part of it. I think for some people, especially if you got back pain. Back pain is like, I think, the worst.
That is the worst.
It's
And the prevalence rates are insanely high. I mean, most people, almost 100% of people are going to experience back pain at some point in their life.
We had a friend of ours years ago who had really, really bad back pain, and I had never experienced back pain
Mhm.
at like when we were all like hanging out and stuff like that. And I remember there was one time where he was like, and he was just in such extreme pain. I gave him such a hard time because I was like, come on. Like, and then I
Yeah.
wound up actually hurting my back. And I remember being like, I am so sorry for all the times I gave you a hard. Like, I am the biggest jerk. I was like, this is the worst pain ever.
yeah.
And it's just, it seems like once you hurt it, you're always just going to re-injure it on some level.
Yeah.
Way easier than you ever did before.
I mean, that plays right into, the discussion that we're having. That alarm system is going to be turned up high for anything that,
Mhm.
is potentially threatening to the back. And we also just, as humans, and probably rightly so, like 10 midline things will tend to rate higher in terms of pain and sensitivity because, this like spine and neck
Yeah.
and stuff is...
It's like the core of your body.
Yeah.
That's where it seems like all the pain receptors are.
Mhm.
As it radiates back from your tip of your fingers back. That's where it's where the organs are. This is gonna be hurt really bad.
Yeah, and like I said, that's probably a good thing, right? Is that we're sensitive to midline stuff. But yeah, back pain is huge, and I'll tell you, we've been really, really bad at treating it in the past, like to the tune of now, there's like billions of dollars that are spent on back pain research. I think, don't quote me on that, or actually, you're probably going to quote me on this because we're being quoted right now, literally.
We'll put a
But,
disclaimer. How's that?
Yeah, disclaimer. I think I'm almost positive this is true, but I think more back pain is a bigger strain on the medical system than like heart disease, diabetes,
Is it
cancer
really?
combined. Yeah, I think it's massive. And so we're getting better. And I think some of this pain science stuff is helping us a little bit. Movement optimism is helping us a little bit where, in the past, maybe recommendations were like, just go lay down and don't move and, never twist your spine or bend again. And that leads to more hypersensitivity
Mhm.
Oh,
of because, you're not moving it. And then when you do, it's a big alarm system, right? So if we can get people to, get moving and, all that goes to say, like, there are absolutely, red flag things and things that, we're screening for and making sure we're all good there. But if we're all good, we should try and restore that movement so that people can get back to doing what they
Daily
love.
lives,
Yeah.
So you mentioned like a lot of the sports injuries are like ACL tears, arm, leg, that type of thing. Where a lot of the movement type injuries, but probably I'm guessing probably not as much as like the back and spinal things because they are constantly working on core and back strength and
Yeah.
whereas an everyday person doesn't focus on that, and so their likelihood of injuring their back maybe goes up.
I don't know. I might push back on that a little bit.
Perfect. Yeah. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just throwing it out there.
I love it though. This is so fun. I mean,
He's like, no.
I wouldn't. I think that like we see athletes with back pain quite a bit, and I think that goes back to the paradigm of like, and this is me coming out of school, was like, oh yeah, core strength, the stronger your core is, the less back pain you're going to have.
Okay.
And like, this is another kind of paradigm shift, is we thought like weakness equals pain, right? So if you're weak, you're going to have pain. But once again, I've dealt with athletes who are some of the biggest, strongest, fastest athletes in the world who have very strong cores who also have back pain. And by that logic, like, you know, the weakest people would have the most prevalence of back pain, and it just hasn't shown to be true in the literature. So it's just a funny world that way, where yeah, you get back pain in athletes. You also get acute, you know, ankle sprains and shoulder, you know, joint issues and things like that. But yeah, the athletes, they still get back issues.
Interesting. Is it? Do you feel like they can put more strain on it, and then that's where the injuries come out, where they overloaded something a little bit more than?
Yeah, probably a too much, too fast, too soon, like dosage issue, or like a big inflection point, or, you know, maybe they do have something mechanical where, you know, they're not moving as efficiently as they could, or maybe a past injury, right? You know, something that happened in high school that, you know, wasn't a problem, and now, you know, down the road, it's like, okay, as I'm doing more load and more force, I mean, it could be like anything across the spectrum. Yeah. That's PT in a nutshell. It's kind of figuring those things out. It's a fun puzzle to solve.
I like watching the strongman competitions where they're picking up the rocks and they keep getting bigger and bigger. You can see their back is rounding out, and they're bending backwards, and it's like, oh my God, my back hurts just watching them.
But that's a great example of, you know, athletes who are lifting with a rounded spine, you know, which in the past it's like, don't ever lift with a rounded back. You know, a good example is an exercise that's called a Jefferson curl. And a Jefferson curl is literally like the world's worst straight-legged deadlift. You're just rounding your back and pulling back up, and rounding and pulling back up. And there's weightlifters, competitive weightlifters, snatch, clean, and jerk, like Olympic weightlifting, that will train that way. And they'll start with like, you know, 5 pounds in each hand, and they'll round down and round up, and they'll work up to like really heavy loads. Rounded and strongman, same thing, right? You're probably, it's probably not, this is dosage, right? It's not going to go well for like me to go pick up a 300-pound Atlas stone like I can, right? I can't even do that.
Yeah.
But if I try and do that with a rounded back, it's probably not going to go very well.
Yeah.
But if I start with a 20-pound stone and I'm like picking it up, and then I build that up over time. So those athletes that you see have built the capacity to tolerate those positions. It goes back to, we've gotten away a little bit. I'll just throw this nugget at you of like, we're not labeling that position as bad or good. It just is a position, and are you prepared for it or not? So, yeah.
So with some of these athletes, especially on the professional side, are things advancing to where like they can now come back and play where they couldn't before, as far as the treatments that are coming out?
Yeah, ACL is a great example of that. I mean, the technology with the surgeries has like light years ahead. I bring my mom back into it, like the late 80s, you know what I mean? And a little bit before that, like your ACL, you were just kind of done.
It was like career
Yeah,
ending.
if you watch, remember the Friday Night Lights movie with Boobie Miles, and
Yes.
he got his knee injury and he's like done, right? And I watched that and I'm like, what are you talking about, dude? Like
get in there.
You're back better than ever in like 11 months. Like, let's crush it, you know? But yeah, it's come a long way, and some of that is objective testing. So like, we're able to, on the rehab side, like see under the hood a lot more than we could in the past. So we use things like force plates, force dynamometers, which get a lot of use in our clinic. But we can have someone like jump on a force plate, for example, and see like how much are they using their right versus their left. Like, is there symmetry?
That's wild to
Yeah.
me. When I heard about that for the first time,
Yeah.
that it's like you can actually see where they're placing all of their energy.
Yeah, something that you
crazy.
might not be able to see with the naked eye, right? Or, you know, watching them run in slow motion
So
capture.
kind of like if you're right-handed or left-handed, you can be left-footed or right-footed, just kind of where
You totally can be. And with injury, like, you might look and see someone and they're like, oh, they're jumping well. But their injured side, they might be, you know, for what you might call like their concentric force production, let's just say pushing the ground away and jumping up into the air, they might be using 30% less of their affected side that you wouldn't necessarily be able to pick up on with the naked eye. And so then those findings drive intervention. So we would do an intervention that was specific to those deficits.
That's great. So our daughter, she had, oh gosh, I think it was when she was having really bad, she had knee pain and hip pain.
Mm-hmm.
And so she wound up seeing I can't remember the name of the doctor, but it was before she got referred over to the sports medicine. And he wanted to get images, make sure there wasn't anything else going on. And he was able, I can't even remember what it was tied to, but it was something that you wouldn't even think of, completely not even related to the knee. I was like, well, I want to say it was something in her core she was
Could
doing.
be, yeah.
It was like one of the simplest things to do. I think it was core. And he was like, that's what's causing your knee pain. I'm like, how is that hurting your knee? And he's like, well, let me show you. And he's like talking us through like how it's all connected and everything. And I'm like, your brain doesn't go there. Like your knee hurts. It's got to be something with your knee.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's because you're not using this correctly. So you're putting more strain on different parts of your body.
Yep.
Just wild.
It's a thing.
It's
Wow.
wild. Okay. So 2018, you started your first clinic.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
That was me and one of my PT buddies, Curtis, got this like crazy idea to start our own PT clinic, and we opened it up in a broom closet in a CrossFit gym. And my wife was 6 months pregnant at the time.
You're like,
and
this is gonna be great.
Left a job. Like, my wife was awesome. She was like, you have to do it. You got to try it. You got to go for it.
He likes to say it's gonna change our lives. He tries to sell me on something, and every single time he's like, it's gonna change our lives. I'm
Yeah.
like,
My wife is amazing, and she gave me like the full thumbs up and was like, you got to try. You'll regret it if you don't. And so, Curtis and I, we started Headquarters PT in a broom closet in a CrossFit gym, and learned business on the fly. Just School of Hard Knocks business wise, and a lot of books and a lot of reading and a lot of great mentors, and some good strategic partnerships. And Curtis, I actually just finished buying out Curtis this year, and we're still great friends to this day. He lives out in the Dalles, and so Curtis, just finished buying him out, and it's grown to 4 locations and
You
7
just kind of go
PTs.
down. Was it strategic as far as how you chose the locations, or is it like this? I really like this city. I'm just going to put something here.
At the beginning, it was like no strategy. It was like, where can we get
Who has
in?
a building we can use?
Who's got an empty broom closet, right?
Yeah.
But no, as we progressed, one of the biggest strategic partnerships that we did was with eForce in Portland, and they do 7-on-7 football. They do performance training. I collaborate with used to be Eric Jernstrom, who's now with the Atlanta Falcons as their assistant director of strength conditioning. Coach Dan Ketchum is now the guy who does all the NFL stuff with me in the off season. So he's the strength coach. I'm the PT, and we're collaborating. But they also do, performance training, club basketball, club baseball, kind of across the spectrum, and they have great gym spaces. So it was just natural for us to partner. And then we're also partnered with the Henninger Golf Farm. So we have 2 PTs who are golf specialists.
Oh, okay.
And Brian Henninger has his place in Tualatin, where John Leidholt works out of. He's one of our PTs who's an amazing Titleist Performance Institute certified golf PT. And then we brought the Henninger Golf Farm out to Bend as well. So we share a facility with them in Bend.
So how many people do you have working for your entire organization?
9.
That's awesome.
9 people.
That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when did you go to Bend? Was that the last one?
So Bend was basically a year of soft launch with Jonah. Jonah Koski runs the facility out there, and I would be willing to bet that if anybody from Bend is listening to this podcast, they'll probably know Jonah because he just knows
He's
everybody
everywhere.
out there.
Yeah.
He's all over. And so we kind of did the same model where we opened up in just a year. We did a year of this, opening up just some spare office space in one of the gyms down there. And then it grew. And this last December, we moved into our own facility with the golf farm, and we put about $100K into the facility to make it nice and pretty and up to par with where we're at business wise now. And so
you got a cool space. I've seen it on social media. You guys should check it out and take a look at the space. But it's pretty cool. I'm not sure which one I'm looking at, but I've seen the spaces, so I know they're pretty cool looking. So
yeah, you got either blue walls, red walls, or gray walls.
Which are which?
Beaverton's gray, Tualatin and Bend are blue, and Milwaukee.
Ooh, nice
is red.
identifiers.
Okay,
Yeah.
There
that's
you
cool.
go.
So what's this? What's a net workout? You guys were talking about that before. I'm curious
We
about what
heard
it
that
is.
phrase.
Yeah.
Megan's going to be very pleased with us. This is good. So Megan, we do a lot of workplace wellness, as I mentioned, and Megan is our workplace wellness director slash kind of like business director. And she had this idea that she'd kind of been seeing on LinkedIn, but this idea of networking out. So you get a bunch of professionals and business people together for a networking event, but we actually do a workout together.
Okay.
We did a group fitness workout together. Super fun. We did one earlier this year that was great. We bring out some local people that, you know, provide food. The aesthetic experience in Lake Oswego came out and did B12 shots for us for all the people that were at the networking event. We've got Sarah from Stella's Kitchen in Lake Oswego, which is an awesome like boutique meal prep service. She's going to be providing food for our next one, which I think is April 2nd. But yeah, networking out is just a fun time for people to connect, make great business connections,
Yeah.
and come work out together.
Yeah.
So it's kind of neat to see. So my mom used to work for a big company, and they started making this shift probably towards the last couple years that she was working there, where they started really promoting like physical fitness for their employees, because they were finding if their employees were more fit, then their insurance claims were reducing because they weren't having as many health issues. So then they started almost rewarding them for doing it. Like if you get 10,000 steps in a day. I remember she had like this little, is it called pedometer? Is that what it's called?
yeah.
It's the
One
ones that
pedometer.
look, yeah.
Yeah. And so they were encouraged to get X amount of steps in per day, and you could log it. And it was this whole thing to make it fun, where they were encouraging their employees to, you know, go seek out ways for better wellness and stuff like that. They would bring physical therapy people in to come in and say, okay, well, what's the best way to do kind of like the workplace injury reduction type stuff, but also saying, okay, how can you apply this like in your daily life? Are you seeing a lot more of that?
Yeah, that's
now?
exactly what we do.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we do that with ADEC Dental down in Newburgh, which is like the world's biggest dental manufacturer. They make, like, if you've been to the dentist, you've sat in an ADEC chair.
Really?
Most
Oh,
likely,
wow.
yeah. Portland Police Bureau, Beaverton Police, Northland Construction, which is a great remodel group based out of Sherwood. Assured Dental Lab, which they make the prosthetics that go in the, I mean, all these great groups that we do educational seminars with, events, like you said, the, you know, steps tracking and that sort of thing, all the way to like hands-on offsites with those people. Yeah, we actually have an on-site clinic at ADEC, so I guess you could count that as another location. But yeah, we have a dedicated office at ADEC where twice a week we send a PT out there and work with their employees. So yeah,
That's cool.
Wow.
So you're
Well-
making a lot of connections.
Mhm.
And what, I guess for your business, what is your goal? Is it, do you have a certain like benchmark you want to hit with like a connection or an industry that you want to get into?
Just throw it out there. Hopefully they're listening.
it's a great question. On the workplace wellness side, it's probably less about the industry and more about the leadership of the company. People that usually like owner operator or, you know, like founder who's, you know, still involved with the business tends to be a really good candidate, because they actually like, they really care about their employees. Like that's their people, you know, and they really care about their people. So we tend to do really well with people like that, because we're kindred spirits. I mean, you know, HQ's my baby, and I really care about the people that work there, and we try and provide a really good product. So yeah, good people that, you know, want to see that healthier, happier, more engaged, less likely to generate an insurance claim.
But happier employees too.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's huge. Like some of the stuff that we do is really fun. I'll give you an example. Danny, who I told you about, is one of our PTs. She's a certified professional bike fitter. And ADEC down in Newburgh, that's out in wine country, right? They have this huge population of employees that are cyclists. They ride their bike to work and home, and they, you know, at their lunch break will do a lap around Newburgh. And so we were like, hey, let's do a bike fitting event. So all the employees brought their bikes to work, and it was during the summer, so we're out in the parking lot. We had like smoothies and made this big event out of it. And Danny was out there just helping people get their bikes set up
Yeah,
correctly.
that's cool.
So
Yeah.
it's like team building, fun.
Yeah.
People get to know each other. Yeah, it's super fun. Yeah.
So that's where it comes in, that preventative medicine type thing that I think employers are kind of gravitating towards because they don't, like you said, they don't want to generate that liability of a workplace accident. So let's look at. There's a lot of that offer like gym memberships and things like that now to kind of like encourage that to happen. So,
but I feel like there's also a huge shift right now that's happening towards wellness just in general.
Oh yeah, wellness. Get this. I just heard this the other day. The wellness.
He's like, wait till you hear this.
The wellness industry as a whole just crossed $4 trillion.
Seriously.
Yeah, as like total value on the industry, which is wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's big. I mean, because you get facilities that are like, hot tub, cold tub, like cold plunge sauna facilities and spas and acupuncture.
People are starting to have cold plunge tanks installed in their home. Like
Oh,
when
yeah,
they're
it's
building
huge.
like new construction, it's like, and this is my cold plunge tank. It's like, what?
Mhm.
How do you feel about that? I mean, is it as far as the physical therapy side, is that something that you would recommend?
Is it a panacea? Is it like the magic bullet? Probably not.
Yeah.
But it's good. And we're learning more. I think the cold plunge specifically, the magic there is the repeated exposure to stress. So, then we could go like an hour on this, but I'll keep it really short. In modern life, we don't get a lot of completed stress cycles from a physiological and like what you would call autonomic nervous system, what's going on below the waterline. You don't get a lot of completed stress loops. So in the past, like hunter-gatherer, you might be out in the woods and you come across a bear and you're either going to defeat this bear or you're going to run, fight or flight, exactly, or you're going to get eaten. And either way, you're going to have a completion to this stress loop. Where like cortisol, right? It's like, oh, whew, I made it. I'm good.
Yeah.
And your body's up. And then you're
like outran another one.
And then you appropriately
your body
a little bit more parasympathetic, right? Sure. We have constant news cycle. We have social media. We have all of these stresses that don't ever come to a resolution, right? So we're constantly sympathetic, fight or flight, dominant in our physiology. So cold plunge is pretty cool because you can complete a stress loop, right? It's not fun to get in that cold water, but you get there and you're hyperventilating, you kind of slow down, and then it comes to a conclusion,
and your body rewards you by getting out of that situation.
By getting out of that situation, and then you shift into a parasympathetic state, and so there's some cool stuff with that for sure.
I think like you're saying that the wellness industry is how many billion?
4 trillion.
Trillions?
4 trillion.
Yeah.
Trillion with the
I think people like hear like cold plunge. That's what I'm missing right now. I need to have that cold plunge tank, and then because my feed now shows cold plunges because I just said it, and so people are looking for what is the thing that's going to complete me physically, and so I guess steering people to what is working, what is promising, but what is actually going to work for your situation is not necessarily going to be. An athlete probably needs a cold plunge. Whereas someone just every day just working out, maybe it's not necessary to go to that extreme.
Yep, I would say sleep.
Which a lot of people
all
don't
comes
get.
back to sleep.
It's like the best thing you can do for yourself is sleep 8 hours. And once again, like I'm a parent, like we get the kids in bed by 8, and then my wife and I have maybe a couple hours to hang out together, and then 5 a.m. alarm, and so I get it. And people do shift work. I mean, that's a whole nother ball game. It's tough, but sleep is huge. And the cold plunge once again is like, I'm not gonna tell somebody who sleeps like crap, doesn't fuel appropriately nutrition wise, doesn't move their body, doesn't do anything progressive in terms of progressive overload and stress, to be like, this cold plunge is going to be like the thing for you but I will say, if you have all those things in place and then you are adding in cold plunge, and once again, I'm very much of the mindset of like anything is better than nothing, right? Those are just like, it's kind of like big rocks to small rocks, right? And that cold plunge, can give you an edge and can help you with stress management and that sort of thing. But it's probably, not the thing that's going to like move the needle the most in terms of your overall health and wellness.
But people talk about with the cold plunge stuff how it increases like your mental toughness, which all goes back to that psychological piece. Dang it, all comes back to the brain.
Yeah.
It's the brain.
Yeah.
It's pretty important.
But like you said, start with the basics. I mean, we were talking with Ryan about this situation on the training side for like bodybuilding. It's like, where do we start? Where, what should we do? What crazy exercise? And he's like, start with the basics and build off that. And so you're probably coming from the same stances. Start with the basics, the sleep, nutrition, and basic body mechanics before we start diving into all these extra things.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Ryan's a great trainer, and I know Ryan. And yeah, he definitely is tied in with that as well. Yeah, the big another way to say it is like people will major in the minors. They'll major in the minors, right? It's like do this, and this.
Yeah.
And in terms of things that actually physiologically make an adaptation, it's not moving the needle very much.
All right. Well, so how do people find you guys on social media and your website, and
how do we support you?
Yeah, how do we get your name out there?
Come say hi anytime. Yeah. HQ_PT is Instagram. We're pretty active on Instagram. Our website is headquarterspt.com. Sign up for our newsletter. We send a lot of cool stuff out in the newsletter. We do a lot of like fun giveaways and stuff like that on Instagram as well. So people are more than welcome to join us there. But yeah, come say hi, schedule a discovery call on the website. And that's either me or Danny who does the discovery call. So you're going to be talking to one of us, and we love to talk to people about what they've got going on. And yeah, we totally do. Yeah. Even if they never come in. So it's fine. We talk them through some things, and yeah.
All right. Well, Ryan, appreciate you coming out. We've learned so much today.
I know.
Yeah, we went a little bit deep on some of those topics that we would never even thought about. So I appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah,
it was great.
I had a good time.
We're gonna go get caught up on sleep now.
I'll come back anytime. We can chat. This is wonderful. You guys are great, and your podcast is awesome.
I
appreciate
it.
It's a blessing to the local business community and beyond. So yeah, you guys are amazing.
All right, appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks.
Of course.